welcome to whatever. Well, Nettie's here. You know, I am in my new painting smock. It's fresh for the fall. See, it's got a little, sunflowers on it. It's seersucker, so it's washable because Nettie makes a mess whenever she does art. And we're going to do some art today. But it's attached to some of the things that Nettie has had going on in her life for a long time. So, you've been through the evacuation with me. I'm going to go through eye surgery and, little hiccups in life that just kind of happen. And I find myself sometimes in a stew over that. And the only way Nettie really settles down into getting back into life is two things. Meditation time to sift through what I need to feel and let go of the things that won't help me to hang on to. And so it's not so hard when you've got your home and other people don't. But I do know that it was time to settle into a place where I could create something with my hands and not think in my head and not be attached to the news. And so I decided to pull out a project I've been working on for a long, long time. And I'm documenting that. And so you can watch this documentation, but what's more important is the story behind it. So, a long time ago, when my parents were free to travel on their own, once the kids were out of the house, they used to travel all over the place. And it seems like every place they went, this little Seagull showed up. And especially when they came to the town that I live in now. They went to one hotel on the beach, and there was a little friend named George that lived on the balcony. Yes, George. And he became a great joke. George the Seagull. Not Jonathan Livingston, because he was kind of snooty up there. Not really. Jonathan Livingston's Seagull got famous, and George is just George. And so my parents named him George, and it seemed like no matter where they went, George would find them, even in Reno. So the kids, my siblings and I, kind of made that a joke, and it's been part of our life for a long time. But after the death of my parents, George started showing up for Nettie and Fred. Some very significant moments, and we could go into those, but let's just say, at a time when I was officiating my first wedding for a dear friend, and she was kind of concerned because she'd gone through a divorce, and it wasn't like she didn't want to marry him, but there was just a need for some sort of spiritual confirmation that she was doing the right thing. It wasn't until after this ceremony, when the bride and groom were standing in front of me, and the picture was taken with my face, them to the side, and right between all of us, sitting on the little deck, little fence right behind me, was George. Now, this particular friend knew the stories about George. She knew a lot about my parents. And I said, my mom and dad were here, and they sent some confirmation through George. So that's just one. So when Nettie and Fred bought this house, we still had children in school, and we had no idea, not that we could even think about buying a second home. But my Aunt Nettie passed away at the age of 96 and left us a small sum of money that it wasn't enough to pay off a bunch of bills, and it wasn't, it was just something to put away, and I'd put it away. I'd put it away for like 2 years and just left it. Then all of a sudden one day, we were in the neighborhood of my childhood vacation spots, one of them, where we used to come to this lake. And I loved it, and it stayed in my mind forever. I've always loved this lake, and my sister and I decided to go around and look at real estate. Well, when Fred came back from his little work trip, I took him around and showed him. We were just on vacation up here. And you know what? across the street, up the hill, there was a little house for sale, and we pretended with the kids, what if we bought this? Would we like it? And everybody gave their opinion. And, we went to move on to the next house, and we came down to the bottom of the hill, and here was a for sale by owner sign on this house. Ha! Well, Fred's pretty assertive. He saw the owner in the yard, and he got out and started just chit-chatting. Fred does that to everybody he meets. He just chit-chats for no reason, but he always ends up with interesting information. Well, 2 hours later, we were in the car driving home, and we decided we should take this seriously because they didn't want a whole lot of money down because they were retired. They wanted to carry the loan, and it was just like, well, let's do it. Well, it was ups and downs, and we ended up getting it. But I tell you, the one thing I didn't notice was something right next door. So we closed on the house, and we came back, and I looked across the lake, and on the way across the lake was my neighbor's yard. And here was a cement seagull statue looking out to the lake. It looked an awful lot like George. From that moment on, I was settled in the fact that this was something we're supposed to do, and even though we had to rent it, vacation rental for a long, long time, it was a refuge when we had to sell our house in California and move here. And with all the ups and downs of that, somebody knew ahead of time that Nettie needed to be where she finds her spirit. So that little seagull has sat next door for years and years, and I'm going to tell you that story because he was removed from that property, and in the process, he got busted up. Yeah, I got busted up real good, and I love doing artwork, but reconstructing something that means something to me, well, it's sort of been this joy and a time of meditation and realizing as I pieced him back together that, that's somewhat symbolic of all of our lives. Things just feel busted up sometimes, don't they? And, it feels impossible and we're overwhelmed. But it's only one step at a time. What do you want to do about it? Do you want to recover something you've lost? Do you want to fix what's broken? Or is it time to let go? So as I ponder all these things, piece by piece, I put George back together. And, even though he won't be quite complete, I want to show you my thinking about putting things back together. For years, George sat next door, first as a symbol of confirmation about buying our home, but always he was a symbol, like many statues, that reminds us of our purpose, our spirit, and to slow down, to be mindful, and to connect with our spirit inside. Just like a rainbow symbolizes hope, or a cross symbolizes sacrificial love, or a wedding ring that symbolizes eternal love, or maybe an eagle that flies and soars in freedom and reminds us of our Creator. Sometimes something out of the blue becomes a personal symbol, just like George did for me. George has stood by us during all seasons in rain and snow and sun, and he watched us, we knew our vows, he saw us struggle when our boat sank. He never wavered. The day he was removed from my neighbor's yard, my heart sank. He had been recovered by yet another neighbor on the other side of us. So I remained content to watch George from afar until they decided to move and take George with them. I thought it unreasonable that my head and my eyes and my heart would deceive me by overreacting and sobbing in pain behind closed doors in my room. It's a cement seagull, I said to myself, a thing. So I dried my eyes and started thinking about what I could do, not what I couldn't do. So I planned to purchase another George and install him, along with all the symbolism that this other George had been for me. Well, all that took about 10 minutes after my neighbor had given me the bad news. Then I was awakened from my reckoning by a knock on the door by my neighbor, who was standing there holding George, and I had become resolute in doing what I could with what I had. So now George is going to become a beauty in his own right once I get busy fixing his little noggin. Well, it was like a miracle ending to a Hallmark movie. Sometimes we just get lost in the process of rebuilding, and it doesn't even matter if it's fancy or whatever. But as you get involved in the elements of what you have to do, it takes your mind away from all the things that you just can't do anything about at the time. And art is a good place to meditate and to think about what's meaningful to you. I feel blessed that it was George that I get to put back together, because he reminds me that I'm never alone in the journey. He reminds me that some things are worth keeping. Some reminders are good things to have visible. So every time I look at George, it's not that I just keep thinking about my parents and missing them or whatever. It's about that little symbol that started years ago, that whenever George was around, there was a unity. There was humor. There was spirituality. There was just the understanding that we're not alone, that some forces of nature, some elements of spirit are just there and become visible in interesting things. Okay, I think we're ready. So I've kind of done a little rope here because I gotta fix his little neck, a little broken neck. We're just gonna put it in there. I've never done this before, but it's supposed to be just like sculpting clay, so it's not too hard. And we're gonna see. We're just gonna see. Fix this up, then I can wet my fingers. Well, I forgot to bring the water out. I'll just use a little bit of soda water. I'm going to get him painted, and then we'll have a little christening for St. George. Oh, should I call him that? Well, I think so, because St. George showed us the way. Look at that. It's just about ready. It's kind of a fun project. Nettie hasn't used clay for a long time. This is like clay, but it's epoxy sculpture. And it does a lot of things. Maybe we'll figure out something else to use it for. And got the little tail repaired. Okay. Gonna be fun to paint. Well, here we go now. We're almost ready to put the color on St. George. So, we have to dry brush him. Well, here we are, my messy desk. Well, it's only messy because I've got paints all over. I use my brown paper for blenders and my paint brushes and my rag. And you know what? Here's George. So far, look at him. He's not done yet. I've got some touch-ups to do right here. And on his face. And then I have to seal him and then make a little stand for him. But I think it's so exciting to know that soon, after we figure out the stand and get that painted and him sealed against the elements, that he's going to be back out on duty. You know, we're going to get to watch him look over the lake. More importantly, George is going to be back on duty, watching out over the lake, being there just to remind us that, there's a holy presence that's always there. And St. George, he's a cement seagull. But sometimes our statues, and sometimes these little gifts, we don't know what's happening at the time, but this little reminder that the answers for us for certain things are just there if we sit and listen, if we notice the clues. So, I do think that there was some divine intervention with George, and George has been present so many times. So he's going back out on duty. He's moved next door to Nettie and Fred's house. And I hope that he's here for a long, long time to come so that my grandchildren will know St. George is on duty, protecting them, being with them, and reminding them there's a higher power willing to help you along the way when you need questions answered. All right. This is a way to learn to be a first responder in love. Because first you ask, then you listen for the answer. And you might be surprised how you are used to be the light for someone else and to be the first responder to someone else through something like my friend, St. George. You're looking good, friend. Thank you for helping us be the light at Nettie's the Lighthouse. Bye-bye. Oh, George, I'm so glad you're back. If you want to see more of these educational videos from Nettie, if you subscribe, then Nettie will be around for a long time. Well, please subscribe.